Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello and welcome to episode 918 with Paul Sloane. Paul has a wealth of wisdom when it comes to how we can think better, innovate better, get cool, brilliant, creative solutions, try on different thinking styles, and collaborate all the more effectively with others as we're doing so. So you'll learn 1, the top question to ask when problem solving, 2, the simple trick for improving your memory, and 3, how to build rapport with anyone with one phrase. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP918. And here's a bit about Paul. Paul Sloane is the author of many books on lateral thinking and the leadership of innovation. He graduated from Cambridge University with a degree in engineering. He had a successful career in sales at IBM before becoming marketing director and then managing director at the database company Ashton-Tate. He is subsequently the VP International and CEO of software companies and now speaks and consults on lateral thinking and innovation with corporate clients. So big thanks to Paul for sharing his wisdom with us, and big thanks to our sponsors, Uplift Desk, where you can build your dream workstation, and BetterHelp. At Uplift Desk, they are hooking us up with a 5% discount with the code AWESOME at upliftdesk.com. And I am so pleased because I use my Uplift Desk every workday when I'm recording the show, preparing things, and doing just about every work thing that I do. Being able to go from sitting to standing and back in seconds is just totally huge. Changed my whole work experience. I purchased an Uplift Desk over 5 years ago with my own money and have dutifully moved it multiple times from home to home when other furniture didn't make the cut during moving day. And just recently, I got another for my home office. I really enjoy being able to stand to get the creative juices flowing, to energize a little bit, get more productive and alert, and then return right back to sitting when I want a breather. The Uplift Desk doesn't wobble, and you can customize yours with over 100 desktop choices and hundreds of additional accessories. Their configurator they got online is super cool and fun and easy. They got free shipping, free returns, a 15-year warranty, and awesome service that I have personally experienced, been impressed with. And I'm not alone. They got a 4.9 Google rating and thousands of reviews that share a similar tale. They ship the desk super quick. In fact, it's the quickest delivery of a piece of furniture I've ever purchased online. So they got that going for them too. If you head on over to upliftdesk.com and use the code AWESOME for 5% off your order, I think you'll be so pleased you did. That's Uplift, spelled UPLIFT, desk.com to get 5% off your entire order with the promo code AWESOME. And also big thanks to our sponsor, BetterHelp. This time of year can be a lot with wrapping up projects before the end of the year, holiday pressures, and ample food, socializing, and germ spreading. At the same time, though, adding something new on top of that that's positive to your life can really help counteract some of those stressful overwhelm vibes. Therapy can be a bright spot amid all the stress and change, something to look forward to, make you feel grounded, and give you the tools to manage everything that's going on. Therapy's helped me get clear on my priorities, streamline commitments, set healthy boundaries, which can come in handy right around now. So if you're thinking of giving therapy a try, do check out BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, affordable, and suited to your schedule. You fill out a quick questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you so desire, you can switch your therapist up anytime for no additional charge. So find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/awesome. That's betterhelp.com/awesome today for 10% off of your first month. Now, here's Paul. Paul, welcome to How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
Peter, I'm delighted to be on the show.
Well, I'm delighted to be chatting, and I am excited to hear about some of your wisdom you've collected over a whole career with 17 books, talking lateral thinking, being more brilliant, so much good stuff. But first, can you tell us the tale of how you met Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney?
No great tale to tell, really. Took my granddaughter to school one day, to primary school, and it was a private primary school in Sussex in England. And as I was walking through the car park, a man said hello to me, and I said hello back to Sir Paul McCartney, whose daughter went to that same school as well. So that was good. And then a friend of mine, he sponsored the Rolling Stones. He worked as a managing director of a big mobile phone company, T-Mobile, and they sponsored the Rolling Stones on some of their major concerts, and we got to meet them, and I shook hands with Mick Jagger, and he's really quite tiny and frail. I thought he'll never last the concert. And then he came out and he performed, and he was just brilliant. I've seen Paul McCartney perform too, and they're two of my great heroes.
Oh, that's cool. All right. It's just right place, right time.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, now I'm intrigued to hear you share some of your best thinking about thinking. Have you made any particularly striking, surprising discoveries about us humans and how we do our thinking and problem solving over the course of researching this in your career?
Well, I wouldn't claim anything innovative or profound, actually, but I think the most important thing I've found is that people think in very predictable ways, and they think in grooves, and they tend to use the same kind of thinking, the thinking that has served them well up till then. And I think it's like a tennis player who has got a very good forehand, but they don't have a very good backhand, and they don't volley very well. But if they play every shot with a forehand, they can be competitive. And we're a bit like that. We might use critical thinking, or we might use logical thinking, but not use creative thinking or lateral thinking or emotional thinking. But because we go through life making decisions based on the thinking style which has suited us, we get through. It's competent. But if you want to be outstanding, if you want to be an outstanding tennis player, you have to develop drop shots. You have to develop your backhand. You have to go to the net. You have to volley. You have to smash. You need every shot in the book. And to be a great thinker, to be a great, really effective person at work, you need a variety of styles which suit different situations and different challenges. And that's what I address in my book, How to Be a Brilliant Thinker. And what I'm really saying is you need to develop your skill at visual thinking, at mathematical thinking, at logical thinking, at creative thinking, at lateral thinking. A whole range of different thinking styles will make you much more competent and effective.
Okay. Well, could you share with us perhaps any interesting studies or data or cases you've seen, inspiring tales of folks who have upgraded, transformed their thinking capabilities and seen cool results from it?
Well, I've got some personal experiences on my own work where I've changed style, and I've deliberately tried to enhance that. So I worked for IBM. I went through IBM sales training and management training, and had a successful career in sales and management. And then I got headhunted and joined a software company as marketing director. And I was in charge of a team of bright, enthusiastic young people, but they were chaotic. They were charging all over the place, doing all sorts of undisciplined things. And I thought it was my job to manage that and to bring IBM disciplines to the place. And one day on a car journey, our managing director, who was a very experienced guy, he said to me, Paul, he said, you're too tough on your people. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're telling them what to do all the time. And I said, isn't that my job? He said, no. And he was right. And I was being too prescriptive in my approach and not really empowering people and challenging them to come up with their own solutions. Whenever somebody came to me with a problem, I'd come up with my idea, which was often a good idea. And I'd say, try this, do it this way, and telling them how to do their jobs. And in a sense, micromanaging them. It wasn't a good style. You don't develop people with that sort of leadership management style. And I'd like to think that I changed. That was a St. Paul on the road to Damascus moment for me, that I realized that I was being too prescriptive and that I needed to be more empowering and trust people. And if somebody comes to you with a problem, instead of saying, here's what you should do, the right way to handle it, I think, is to say, well, what ideas have you got? And challenge them to come up with ideas first and prompt them to think about the different approaches and explore possibilities with them. And maybe eventually you'll go with your approach. Maybe they'll come up with a better approach themselves, but that will help develop them.
Okay. And in sort of the language that you're using with different styles of thinking, how would you articulate what was your previous thinking approach in those exchanges versus your new approach?
I'd say my previous thinking approach was command and control as a style, which is a management style, which is effective if you're running a junior team, an inexperienced team, an ineffective team, people who aren't doing very well. Command and control is sometimes necessary. Sometimes you have to. But I think what I would call lateral leadership is where you don't lead from the front, you lead from the side as a collegial leader. And as a colleague, you empower people and trust them. If you trust people to succeed, you have to trust them to fail as well. And you have to let go. And that's a different thinking style and a different management style.
Okay. Well, then could you share with us then, what's the big idea, the core thesis behind your book, How to Be a Brilliant Thinker?
It's about adopting different styles, deliberately developing different styles of thinking, and choosing a style which is appropriate for you and for the moment. And to be really successful at work, to get promoted, you need to be good at managing people. And if you're a very good data analyst or a very good programmer, you might be using a lot of logical skills, a lot of rational skills, but you're not using emotional skills to relate to people and understand them and persuade them and motivate them. And you'll never get promoted unless you learn those emotional thinking skills, emotional intelligence, as well as logical intelligence. And if you want to be a successful marketer, you have to use creative intelligence and lateral thinking and be able to think about innovative, radical ideas. So you need this whole range of skills to develop your thinking, and that's the basis of the book.
All right. Well, could you lay out for us this menu? You've used a number of different categories or types of thinking, the emotional, the lateral, the creative, the logical. Can you lay it out? What are the different types of thinking in your typology, and how do you define them, and how do you improve them?
Just to read some of the titles of the chapters. Consider the opposite, confront assumptions, analyze problems. So I do quite a bit of problem analysis and formal problem analysis, critical thinking, asking questions, thinking in combinations, parallel thinking, such as De Bono's 6 thinking hats, a parallel thinking technique, thinking creatively, thinking laterally, how to think what nobody else thinks, how to evaluate ideas, how to make difficult decisions, how to develop your verbal thinking so that you can express yourself clearly, how to develop your mathematical thinking so that you can actually use mathematics as a tool, get to grips with probability, think visually, develop your emotional intelligence, how to be a brilliant conversationalist is one of the chapters in the book, how to win arguments, how to ponder, how to maximize your memory, how to improve your memory, how to tell stories, how to think humorously. So these are some of the chapters in the book. I talk about common thinking errors and ways to boost your brain and games that help you think better.
Okay. Well, could you share with us perhaps what are the most common and destructive errors in thinking that you see professionals make, and how could we go about preventing that from occurring?
Well, there are a lot of errors. There are a lot of cognitive biases and errors, but I think one of the big things that holds us back is making assumptions. And the lateral thinker challenges assumptions all the time. And the command and control leader, the conventional person makes a lot of assumptions. And the older you are, the more experienced you are, maybe the more intelligent you are, the more assumptions you make every day. And we see it time and time again, people being taken in. You know, Bernie Madoff, literally thousands of people lost billions of dollars to Bernie Madoff because they assumed he was a genius. And they assumed that he could give higher than average returns to investors year after year after year. And they made the wrong assumption. People assumed that Elizabeth Holmes was telling the truth when she said at Theranos that she'd got a much better method of analyzing blood. And it was a fraud. Colin Powell and the USA and lots of other countries assumed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, but he didn't. These are wrong assumptions lead us down wrong paths all the time. And the lateral thinkers, creative thinkers, are endlessly curious, and they're always prepared to ask a question and to analyze the evidence. And they believe in evidence, they believe in experiments, they believe in real world data. They don't believe in conspiracy theories, they don't believe in models, they believe in experiments and finding out. Challenging assumptions by asking fundamental questions, basic questions, is one of the central tenets of lateral thinking and of my books.
All right. Could you share with us perhaps a professional example in the workplace where you think this is happening all the time? Folks failing to challenge assumptions, and some assumptions that might well need to get challenged.
It's so easy to see in hindsight, but when you're involved in a business meeting, there are all sorts of assumptions going on. And those assumptions frame the whole view of what's possible and what's not possible. I want you to imagine that you work for Encyclopedia Britannica and it's 1990 and you're in a meeting and they're talking about how they can increase sales. And you say, just a minute, let's look at the assumptions we're making here. We're assuming that people want to buy books and that these books contain curated knowledge, which is provided by experts and edited by experts, teams and teams of experts, and that they're expensive and that we go out and sell those books. And we assume that that's the best model. What if we could create a model which was a completely different, where we didn't pay experts at all. We got people to contribute to the encyclopedia themselves, and we got volunteers to edit it, and we gave it away virtually for free. And that, if you'd made that suggestion, it would have been a career-ending suggestion, I think, within the company, because people would have been horrified that you even thought that, because it challenged all the basic assumptions on which the business was built. And yet Wikipedia is that model. They don't use paid experts. They use volunteers to write the articles and edit and manage and curate all of that knowledge and expand it all the time. And it works. And they give it away for free. And that model, a completely different business model, totally destroyed Encyclopedia Britannica's previously highly successful business model. If you were working for a taxi company and thinking, how can we do things better? You would never have thought of what Travis Kalanick thought when he said, let's create a taxi company without a single taxi. It's an app. And all it does is put people together, those who want a taxi ride and those who are prepared to give somebody a ride in their personal car for a small fee. He created Uber, which became worth $60 billion, and it didn't own it's a taxi company without a single taxi. And it challenged all of the assumptions that taxi companies are based on. Same with Airbnb. I mean, they're a hotel company that doesn't own a single hotel room. So lateral thinkers, creative thinkers are prepared to challenge the basic assumptions that everyone else in the room takes for granted and assumes is a given and must be obeyed.
That's intriguing. In each of these examples, we had an established, entrenched player or system, and then there was an external disruptive force that operated without those fundamental assumptions. And I guess I'm curious in terms of cognitive biases or whatever the word is at play here. In each of those instances, the folks at the hotel chain, at the taxi company, at the Encyclopedia Britannica have a deeply invested interest in continuing to do things the way they are. Hey, I have a fleet of taxis. I've got a beautiful set of many large, expensive, gorgeous hotel buildings. I've got decades of sales data that I'm beholding in my Encyclopedia Britannica. And so in some ways, if they disrupted themselves, maybe they would be in a better position and sort of leading the charge. But how do you recommend when we are entrenched in our ways, and it's almost like, I think in many ways we believe what we want to believe. And we want to believe at Encyclopedia Britannica, if we're there at that time, that we can continue doing the cool thing we've been doing and keep this gravy train rolling and growing. And so how do you think about that notion of we tend to believe what we want to believe as opposed to what is true?
You're absolutely right. We tend to believe what we want to believe, but it's more insidious than that because the customers mislead you. One of my favorite books is by Clayton Christensen. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma. I don't know whether you've read it, but in it he says, what stymies great companies is that they make the mistake of listening to their customers. And I nearly fell off my chair when I read that, because I was always taught that you have to listen to customers and you have to please customers. And that's your purpose in business, is to find solutions that customers like. But he gives countless examples, particularly from computer disk drives, where the leader at each generation was misled by customers who said, we like your product, give us more of what you're doing, only better, faster, cheaper, in green or in German or whatever. Customers always want incremental innovations because they don't understand radical innovations. A customer will never indicate a radical solution to you. And it's somebody else who comes along with a radical solution. And initially the customers rebuff it. And the next time they rebuff it, and then they rebuff it. And then eventually they all move over to it. There are some early adopters, and then the late majority, and then everyone moves over. And the previous incumbent gets wiped out. But they were doing what seemed the right thing. They were listening to their customers. They were following their customers. An example I give is this. Say you were making spectacles in the 1950s, and you said to your customers, how can we make our service better for you? They might have said, well, a scratch-proof lens would be good, or a plastic frame would be good, or a flexible frame would, a different type of glass, a shaded glass would. What would they not have asked for? Not one customer in 10,000 would have said, I want you to create a piece of glass that I stick on my eyeball every morning, contact lenses. Not one customer in 10,000 would have said, I want you to cut through my eyeball with laser beams to change the geometry of my eyeball. laser eye surgery. And yet, and because you're thinking spectacles, you're thinking physical things. But when the companies that are selling spectacles weren't selling spectacles, they were selling better sight. And another way of getting better sight is with contact lenses or with laser eye surgery. But no spectacle manufacturer would ever have conceived of those ideas, and no customer would have indicated that. So it's very difficult. And very often it's the outsider who comes up with the radical innovation. And I've written about this many times in my blogs and books, that it's the outsider that does that.
Yeah, I like that a lot in terms of it's sort of backing up, zooming out, and getting to the fundamentals can help open up a lot of this stuff. In the encyclopedia, it's like, what are we really trying to do here? We're trying to give people a broad set of knowledge about a broad set of things. Okay. Well, there's a lot of ways we can pull that off. Or we're trying to get people from point A to point B, or a room to sleep in.
As you say, you've got this inventory, you've got all this stock, you've got this history, you've got momentum. And the question they should ask is, what is the problem that we are solving for customers? What is the customer problem that we solve? And is there a better way to solve that problem? The taxi driver, they're providing a journey for the customer. That's what they're providing. The hotel room, the hotel chain, Marriott, is providing accommodation for a night. And Encyclopedia Britannica was selling access to knowledge. And in each case, if they thought about that in terms of what is the fundamental product or service we're providing, what's the problem we're solving for customers, they might have stood a chance, though it's still unlikely, of conceiving an entirely different way of solving that problem.
That's beautiful. Thank you. All right. So a common thing that we got to do is challenge assumptions. One way to do that is to ask big questions about the fundamentals that we're delivering. What's another major thinking error that is rampant in professional environments that we should tackle next?
Well, another big problem is confirmation bias, where we look for evidence that supports our hypothesis, what we believe, and we discount evidence which contradicts what we believe. And we see this time and time again. We saw it with COVID. We saw it with the people who believe in vaccines and don't believe in vaccines, and the people who believe in lockdowns and don't believe in lockdowns. And they would find selective evidence that supported their viewpoint. The occasional, the people that didn't believe in vaccines would say, I heard about a chap and he took the vaccine and then he fell very ill, and that shows that they're not suitable. And it was one example out of thousands and thousands. So confirmation bias, where we look for evidence that confirms our beliefs and we don't allow our beliefs to be challenged. The question I often ask people is, when was the last time you changed your mind on a really serious issue? And most people don't change their minds, ever. I mean, you might change their mind as to what meal we're going to have tonight, but they don't change their mind on a big issue. Are we supporting the Democrats or the Republicans? They're tribal. And once you get into one of those groups, then they go to websites and media sources which support a certain viewpoint, and they don't absorb information from other websites or media sources which would challenge their viewpoint. And that is a great enemy of thinking and of diversity and of innovation.
Okay. So confirmation bias is all over the place. It's problematic.
Yep.
How do you recommend we combat it?
By asking questions, by deliberately being open-minded, and force yourself to be open-minded. I gave a TEDx talk on, are you open-minded? And if you go on YouTube and search for Paul Sloane TEDx, you can see it's only 13, 14 minutes, but it's had a tremendous number of views. And in it, I talk about this whole concept of everyone thinks they're open-minded, but most people aren't. Nearly every one of us has blinkers to some extent. And I talk about ways to tackle it. And one way to tackle it is to deliberately go to the opposite end of the spectrum. If you normally watch CNN, watch Al Jazeera instead. If you normally take the Times in England, take the Guardian. So deliberately go to channels and speak to people who will give you a different perspective. So that's one of the approaches. And another is to just do something different every day, to deliberately break the routine, whatever routine you're in, whether it's the way you go to work or where you sit or whatever you do, deliberately do something different. Introduce the random deliberately into your life. If you go on Wikipedia and you look on the left, there's a random article of the day. If you go there, it will take you you'll learn something new that you didn't know, and it will give you a slightly different view of the world. So there are these techniques that you can use in terms of deliberately displacing yourself. You tend to mix with people who are like you. I said to my wife the other day, I said, I met an interesting new chap at the golf club, he's very, and she said, let me guess, is he white? Yes. Is he your age? Yes. Is he a golfer? Yes. Is he middle class? Yes. He's not new. He's exactly like you. And she's right. I'm mixing with people who are like me and they've got similar, and you've got to deliberately step outside that comfort zone sometimes and mix with people who aren't like you in order to understand their perspective of the world.
Okay. One of your chapters, you talk about thinking humorously. What's the value in that and how is it done other than just a lot of laughs?
Well, humor breaks barriers, and humor is very useful. In my talks, I do a lot of serious talks, but I very often start with a joke, or I put some humor into the talk in order to leaven it, in order to lighten it, in order to have some light and shade. Because if you just concentrate on the heavy, serious stuff all the time, it's oppressive for the audience. And if you can mix in a little bit of humor, it makes you relatable. And as a person in the office, it makes you more popular. As a manager, if you use humor, but not sarcasm, not cynicism, but if you use gentle humor, it makes you more interesting and approachable. And I think humor is a very useful thing in life, and it can diffuse tension in a lot of situations as well.
Okay. And any pro tips on how we go about thinking more humorously?
Some people say I can't tell a joke, but everyone can tell a joke and everyone can learn some funny things. And everyone can read humorous articles and humorous writers and learn some of the techniques that they use in order to just put a little bit in there. And the people you follow on Twitter or Facebook, there's some people who are witty and write funny things, and there's some people who don't and write very dull things. So focus on the people who are interesting and witty, and sometimes repeat some of the things they say, but give acknowledgement. Say, I read this today and so said this, and then repeat a witty from someone else. You don't have to be original. You don't have to come up with all the jokes yourself in order to be a funny person.
All right. And one of the ways you mentioned thinking was visually. How is that done?
Well, some people are visual thinkers. They think in terms of pictures. One of the exercises I do in my workshops where I run a brainstorm is the random word. And you have a challenge, whatever the challenge is, how can we improve productivity? How can we cut the project lead times? How can we save cost in terms of our recruitment, whatever it is? And then you take a word at random from the dictionary, and then you'll get some associations of the word. And then you try and force an idea based on the word, which would solve the problem. And you'll come up with stupid idea. And then occasionally you come up with a really creative idea. And people don't believe it until they see it, and it works. And I demonstrated it in my TEDx talk. So that's another reason to watch that on YouTube. But you take the dictionary, you open it at random, and you take a random noun, and off you go. And if the one word doesn't work, you just go on and find another one, and you'll never run out of words in the dictionary. Now, that method works, but sometimes I do it with pictures instead. I take random pictures. A picture of a cathedral, a picture of a candle, a picture of a dog, a picture of a polar bear, a picture of an iceberg, a picture of a fun fair, anything. And I've got a whole range of random pictures. And then you put the random picture up and you say, right, what ideas does that picture give you in terms of this challenge? And some people work much better with a picture than with a word. Some people work verbally and some people work visually. And I think if you choose those different styles and you try thinking in pictures, thinking in cartoons, thinking at a storyboard in terms of something written, it can sometimes be much more powerful and a much better way to get you. If you're trying to communicate ideas, then words are fine and PowerPoint is fine, but images can be so much more powerful. And images, people like video, they like image, and it can be a much more effective way of getting a message across. So if you're not using visuals at the moment, visual thinking, then you're missing a trick.
That's clever, and I like the random prompt, like a dictionary word, or previously the Wikipedia random article. I'm thinking about if you want images, I guess you could go to Google and I'm feeling lucky, and then images, and then you'll get any number of things.
Exactly right. You will.
All right. Well, you've got one of your final chapters, games for brilliant thinkers. I like games. What do you recommend?
Oh, I love all sorts of games. And some games are very logical. I play chess very seriously. I like chess. That's very analytical and logical. But I like lateral thinking games. There's a game called Code Names where you have to find connections between words to suggest links to your partner in that game. That's very good. I like Sudoku. I like Monopoly. I like Cluedo. I like all of those. But there's a whole range of games. I mean, poker is a great game too, though it's a dangerous game because you can lose a lot of money at it. But all of those things are great, I think. And I said chess, Scrabble, Monopoly, bridge, Cluedo, backgammon, poker. Dingbats are, or rebuses as they're called, riddles are visual word puzzles. Articulate, Trivial Pursuit, yes, all of these are good. Pictionary, charades is a lateral thinking game where you have to think of strange connections to get your message across. And of course, lateral thinking puzzles, of which I've written several books of lateral thinking puzzles. And they're the things where you get strange situations and then you have to ask questions and you get yes or no answers from somebody who knows the answer. And that forces you to think laterally because typically you get stuck and typically you make the wrong assumptions. And it's those wrong assumptions that hold you back. So you have to test all your assumptions with the questions you ask in a lateral thinking puzzle.
All right. And you also have a chapter called Maximize Your Memory. Tell us, how is memory still important nowadays with all of our technology and resources and AI and Google searches and Wikipedias?
Well, you've got access to all those things, but when you meet somebody, an employee at work, you need to remember their name. And you need to remember their wife's name if they work for you, or their partner's name, and maybe their children's names, and some issues, things that are important to them. And you can't just go to your phone and look it up. So remembering people's names, have you read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie? It's a classic book written in the 1930s. And one of the things he says is use people's names. And what I would recommend to you, Peter, is that you use people's names. And people like to hear their name. And that's an example of somewhere where memory is really important and you need to work on memory. And there's lots of minor things you can write down, but there's some important things you have to remember. And the techniques, you're driving along, suddenly the urgent jobs you've got to do when you get to the office, you need a way of remembering those. And that's one of the techniques I teach in my memory course, which I do, where you make a huge visual story about the things you're trying to remember. And you exaggerate them and you make them very vivid and very colorful and very dramatic. And then you can remember that story when you get home and you can remember to do those things, which would otherwise just go straight out of your mind. So memory is important and everyone wants a better memory. And people always complain as they get older, their memory's going and all the rest of it. But we can all memorize a lot more and remember a lot more things. And I show people different ways to do this with memory pegging and the virtual journey. So when I give a talk, I'll stand up and speak for 40 minutes at a conference without notes. But I'm doing it with a virtual journey where I go through a particular route. And in each place on the route, I've posted a picture or a person or an image of something which I want them to talk about. And I take that journey and I remember the items. And the virtual journey is one of the techniques which I describe in the book and on my workshops.
All right. Well, Paul, tell me, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
Well, there's a couple of pieces of advice I would give to people, to your listeners, and a powerful piece of advice, which I wish I'd known sooner. And here's one. And this is a phrase which you can use to get people to like you. And it works. It works with any person at any level in the organization. You'll get your boss to like you. You'll get your co-workers to like you. You'll get your kids to like you. You'll get your partners to like you. And this is the magic phrase. Are you ready?
Yes.
What you say is, what I really like about you is. Now, even if there's 10 things you don't like about your boss, there's something about him or her that you like. You have to admit they're really good at this. So you say, what I really like about you, Peter, is you're always clear and to the point, or whatever it is. People like to be praised, and you can always find something good about anybody. So if you say that, it's demonstrated that people's opinion of you goes up. They like you more. They soften to you. They warm to you. So the next time you're with somebody and you want to just improve your relationship, say honestly, and you can always do this sincerely, because there's always something about somebody, no matter how strange or odd or they are, there's always something about them that they're good at, and say, what I really like about you is X. So that's one tip I would give you.
Okay.
Another tip I would give, if you're a manager, and this is so powerful, it's wonderful. And I was taught this at one stage and it made a big difference, and it works for a manager in particular, but it will also work for anybody. If you're a manager, you take your staff in one by one and you sit down with them and you say, I'm going to ask you 2 questions and I want you to give me honest answers. Yeah. And they say, yes, fine, I'll do that, boss. And you say, here's the first question. What am I good at? And typically they'll tell you what you're good at. You're very clear and you're very decisive and so on, so on, so on. And then the follow-up question, which is the key question. You say, where could I improve? And then you shut up and listen. And you can't disagree with them. You can't say, no, you're wrong. You could say, give me an example, give me a for instance, but you listen and you say, thank you. Because you've asked them the first question, what you're good at, they're enabled to answer the second question. If you start with the second question, it doesn't work because they're inhibited from giving you any criticism. People don't like criticism. But because you've asked for the first, they can balance it by saying, well, an area you could improve is X, Y, Z. If you do it with all your people and they come up with similar areas you can improve, you've learned something very, very valuable because you've seen something about yourself that otherwise you would never see.
All right. Well, now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Peter Drucker said this, and I sometimes open my talks with this. He said, every organization must prepare for the abandonment of everything it does. And he said this way back in the 1960s or 70s sometime. And he didn't say every organization has to improve or have to change a bit. He says every organization must be prepared to abandon everything it does. And that is so powerful, I think, and so challenging for many people to take that on board, that I think that's a very, very powerful quote.
All right. And could you share a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
Well, I would say Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma and the research he did in there is very powerful, which shows how leading companies miss innovation because they are so committed to their existing methods and their existing customers. And he brings forth a lot of evidence to support that in his book.
All right. And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
I would say De Bono's 6 Thinking Hats is one of my favorite management tools because it forces you to consider a proposition from several different perspectives, 6 different perspectives with the 6 hats. And it overcomes the big problem we have in meetings, which is, I like my idea, I don't like your idea. And the I am right, you are wrong thinking. And with De Bono's 6 Thinking Hats, everyone's forced to look at the proposition from 6 different perspectives, including the yellow hat, where everyone has to say what's good about the idea. Even if you think it's a lousy idea and it comes from your worst enemy in the whole organization, you have to say, well, it would do this. I have to admit this is a benefit we'd get from it. And then the black hat, where even if it's your idea and you love it and you think it's a great idea, you have to find fault with it. And you say, well, one danger would be this. And everyone has to wear the same hat at the same time. And as a thinking tool and a management tool and a tool for improving decisions in meetings, it's immensely powerful.
Okay. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with readers and listeners that quote it back to you often?
One of my favorites is implementing best practice is copying yesterday. Innovation is inventing tomorrow. That's one of mine. I've got a lot of quotes actually on the internet and other places. Beware of success. It's a terrible teacher. It's another one. I would say ideas are the lifeblood of the organization. Don't be the clot who blocks the flow of ideas. And there are many people who block ideas and say no to ideas very quickly because most really clever, original ideas sound crazy when they're first articulated. So there you are, 3.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Paul Sloane. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Paul Sloane. My website is destinationinnovation.com. And if you just type in destinationinnovation.com or Paul Sloane TEDx, you'll see my TEDx talk. And I'm on Amazon as well, of course, so you can find my books on amazon.com or any other Amazon.
All right. And you have a final challenge or call to action for folks seeking to be awesome at their jobs?
I would share with you the best piece of leadership advice I ever got. And this is so powerful. This is worth the price of admission on its own. This is just 7 words. It's really, really important for leaders, but it also applies at other levels in the organization, but particularly for leaders. And it goes like this: only do what only you can do. There are certain things that only the leader can do. Only the leader can praise people in the group. Only people can hire the new people. Only the leader can work on strategy and direction. And there's lots of other things which, as a leader, I was spending time on firefighting and fixing problems and things I should have delegated and things I should have just ignored and focused on the leadership tasks only. And if you focus on the things that only you can do, then they're the most important things that you should be focused on. So only do what only you can do. And that applies whether you're an artist, a musician, a creator, anything else, but particularly if you're a leader.
All right, Paul, thank you for this. I wish you much fun and brilliant thoughts.
Pete, I've enjoyed it. And we could go on chatting forever, but I really enjoyed it.
I love Paul's sentence or starter. What I really like about you is, or at the very end, you know what I really like about you? Or you know what I love about that? What I love about it, what I love about the phrase, what I really like about you is one, it just galvanizes the attention. Like, oh, I'm listening and intrigued. Do tell. And there's just a little bit of suspense. So we've got the good vibes and then a touch of uncertainty, like, oh, what are he going to say? What's coming next? It's interesting and it's engaging and it feels good. And so often we have these thoughts in our head and in our heart and we don't share them. And I think the holidays is a fine time to share with colleagues, folks you love, what you really like about them. And they'll like it. It just feels good. Feels good for everybody. Win-win-win. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP918. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.